Hello, welcome to Living and Dying, the show produced by Brattleboro Area Hospice, bringing you news and information about the people and activities of Brattleboro Area Hospice. My name is Richard Ewald. I'm a hospice volunteer. Today we're at Living Memorial Park in Brattleboro, just off of Route 9, near the ball fields that most people probably know about, at Brattleboro Area Hospice's Memorial Garden. And joining me here today is Connie Baxter, who is Bereavement Coordinator for the Brattleboro Area Hospice, and Lynn Martin, who is a bereavement volunteer and also facilitates bereavement groups. It's a mid-September day, kind of warmish after a brief rain. How about if we take a stroll through the garden?
Great. Sounds good.
All right. Connie, could you tell us how Living Memorial Park itself got its name, how it came to be?
Yes, I could. In 1944, in the middle of World War II, there was a gentleman from Dummerston who wrote a letter to the Brattleboro Reformer encouraging the community to think of creating what he called a living memorial to those who served in World War II. Something other than a granite monument, which is the norm. And a week later, he pledged a war bond that he had purchased because, you know, a lot of people were purchasing war bonds to finance the war. And shortly thereafter, the Reformer pledged some funds to this effort. And so it just became a very popular thing for people in the community and organizations to pledge war bonds for the creation of a living memorial. And about 10 years later, in the mid-50s, these war bonds started to mature, and they eventually had enough money to purchase some property, and by then they had decided that they wanted this memorial to be a park because it was dedicated to the love of life and living. And so in the mid-50s, they purchased the Clark family farm, which was where we are standing now, and created this beautiful park. And there's a great history that you can get from Carol Lot at the Parks Department that tells about all the different community organizations and Boy Scouts and individuals who donated all sorts of things and worked very hard to create this. And over the years, as the park grew, very often the new components were memorial gifts. So
that's appropriate. Yeah. And here we are at the northern edge of it, and we can see in the distance the ball field, the swimming pool, the ski slope. How did Brattleboro Area Hospice come to occupy this particular piece of the park?
Well, in the late 1990s, Elizabeth Pittman, who was for many years the bereavement coordinator at Brattleboro Area Hospice, visited the Hospice Memorial Garden in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and felt very inspired by that, and knew that we had a lot of gardeners among our volunteers, and thought that it would be great to have a memorial garden. And Hospice approached the town and the Parks Department to let us use some land, and they quickly agreed. And in the spring of 1998, this garden came into being and has grown a lot.
Yeah, here we are 15 years later with pavers and stone walls and benches and trees and shrubs and vines and flowers.
Yeah.
How does the hospice use the space? How has this become a place that's integrated with the bereavement programs?
We have our main memorial service here every year on the first Sunday in June. We invite everyone in the community to come and families of hospice clients. And we get donations of flowers from local nurseries, and people gather and plant flowers in memory of those that they have lost. Leading up to it, we get together and invite community members to come and make these remembrance flags that you see here, which are hung from the trellis every year. and the Hollowell singers, who are the singers affiliated with Hospice, come and sing, and we read names of people who have died in the past years as people plant flowers. So it's kind of our big event. But it's used throughout the year by just individuals who come and spend some quiet time here. Sometimes people will call and ask if they can plant a specific tree or plant here, and I have them work together with our gardener, Hilary Farquhar, to find the best place for the planting. Families will come, groups of friends. This spring I had a call from a woman, and she said a group of friends wanted to plant a flowering tree in memory of a friend who had died. So when we plant trees, we work together with the Parks Department to make sure that we're planting it in an appropriate spot.
I live not very far from here, so I pass this often, and I often see people either just sitting here and walking around.
And then you've been part of some of these memorial services in the summertime, and they're part of the name reading. What is the name reading part of it mean for these events?
Well, I think for the work that I did, when I'm working with it, I worked with a group of parents who had lost young adult children, and that's a very isolating event in their life. I mean, the trauma, the early trauma, and so reconnecting is major in the healing process. And one way is that they reach out to come to the group, and because they feel that someone will understand exactly what I'm going through, who has gone through it themselves, which is, I think, pretty true. This garden is sort of an outreach of that the fact that they can come here together. They can talk about, they get together in a group, the group that I have, and they name the names, and they write them together, their slates together, and they plant them together, and then to hear the names. It validates that it's not just theirs.
So it sounds like it reinforces that community aspect of being in relationship with people. So part of grieving is to remember that we're connected to each other in some way.
Yes, absolutely. And hospice allows that to happen. I mean, when people walk through the door, for my group anyway, they're like a zombie. The trauma is so great, and then gradually you can see the life coming back, and then before you know it, they're reaching out to somebody else.
So
And that's what really gets me.
They're moving from that sense of isolation back into relationship with people.
Yes, and then they'll even become part of other groups, suicide prevention, walks. It's a privilege to me to be able to be a part of it.
And it's nice. It's very grounding to me. Just this place helps us, be outside in a particular place, and it's been so lovingly cared for by so many people. And this little banner, this flag that's fluttering over your head, Connie, has some personal significance. Could you read this to us?
Sure. If you can hold it straight for me, I'll read it. Yeah. This was a banner that my husband, Greg Muschetti, made in remembrance of his brother who died last year. And the story is that his brother, shortly before he died, bought a 1973 El Camino. And
That's the car with the pickup.
That's the combination pickup, truck, car. It's both and neither. Very unique vehicle. And so he was fixing it up and with the intention of giving it to Greg. And they talked about how they wanted to go fishing because that was a real bonding experience for them when they were kids. So this is what Greg wrote. El Camino dreams. We dreamt of lazy days by the river, fishing for bullhead and perch. Two brothers together, cruising in the El Camino. It happened only in our dreams, but it was enough. And the reason that Greg didn't get to Florida in time to go riding in the El Camino with his brother before he died. But it really was a bonding experience for them during those last months.
Well, the Camino is traveling now.
It is, it is.
And I have one more thing I
Sure.
would like to add. It's, coming to this garden was just not for the group. It also is for my own life. I've had a number of losses in my own life. So the same thing that the group was experiencing, I was experiencing too. You don't do this work that way. It's always a circle.
So this beautiful stone bench with the engraving, "We Remember Them," was a gift to the memorial garden by a stonemason after 9/11. I think in the next year after that tragedy. It was donated to the garden and placed here, and has really become a centerpiece for our garden, and just a lovely place for people to sit in the shade as they enjoy the garden.
Also joining us here today is Susan Parris, who is Executive Director of the Brattleboro Area Hospice, who also has personal experience to share with us.
Well, this flag that you're holding, I did this year for my parents, George and Mary, and it says, "Some great morning I'll fly away," so we can let it go and fly, which is a song that Hallowell sings a lot. It means a lot to me. But the garden, as Lynn was saying about it having personal meaning for her, one of the things about being with Brattleboro Area Hospice is that the work we do also involves the staff and the volunteers, because death and dying and grief is something that happens for everybody. So unlike other social service work, we ourselves who are helping people are also involved in the same journeys that our clients have. So what happened for me is that my parents, but at the time my father had died, and it was his 1-year anniversary of his death, and he's buried in the cemetery, the Vermont Veterans Cemetery in Randolph. It's about an hour and 15-minute drive, and we were going to get together for the 1-year anniversary with my family, my 2 brothers, their children, and my mother. And the weather looked really bad, and my mother walked unstably with a cane, and we had to kind of go out into their cemetery, and we just didn't want to get up there and have it be pouring rain, and my brother had driven several hours from the south. So I remembered that we had the garden, and we had a gathering here with my family. So I printed out several poems, and I have a niece who was about 15 at the time, and a nephew and niece that were 8 and 10. And we read poems, and I read one too, and we had read them at my father's service, so there was already that ritual of doing it. And then we got a slate from Hospice, and we filled out his name, and we put it here with all these other beautiful slates, remembering people. And we told stories. Each of us went around in a circle of memories about my father. So it was really meaningful. It meant a lot to my mother. And it was really easy because it was in town. And it was a day like today. I mean, it had been pouring rain. And then by the time we were sitting here in this space, the sun had come out. It was it was September. It was a beautiful day.
So if someone else in the community has a similar situation where they are looking for a place to hold that kind of gathering, how would they go about arranging that?
They could call Connie, our bereavement care coordinator at the office, and talk to her about it. I'm not sure that we want it to become a formal place for large memorial gatherings, because I could imagine that would preclude a lot of people just casually dropping in if there were a lot of scheduled events. But I think for small family gatherings of friends or family, to mark a loss or to come and plant a flower, it would be perfect.
Great.
And we encourage people to do that.
Okay. So Connie, how are people in the Brattleboro area, Windham County area, using this garden?
Well, they use it in a variety of ways. We have bereavement volunteers who spend time with someone who is grieving, and very often the bereavement volunteer will bring the person that they're working with here to the garden just for a visit, maybe to have a picnic lunch, or to plant a plant or a flower, to write on a piece of slate or a stone to put around the garden. So it's kind of a very personal one-on-one memorial service that they have. There are many stories of young people in our community using this garden. I've been told, I haven't witnessed it firsthand, but our gardener, Hillary Farquhar, has told me that there's a teacher from the Austin School who over the course of the season will bring 2 or 3 students at a time and spend time here with them in the garden. And she can only guess at what they're talking about because they're talking in sign language, but we think that it's to talk to them about what the garden is for and the significance, and maybe about losses in their own life. We know that frequently the teachers at Winston Prouty, which is just down the street, will bring the young children here just for an outing and to enjoy the flowers. Before prom, it's a popular spot for the high school students to come and have their prom photos. Because when you think about it, it's spring and there are beautiful flowers blooming, and it's just a beautiful spot, and we're happy for people to use it because it also introduces them to the fact that this is a memorial garden, and maybe they have some conversations about what that means, or they remember it, when a grandparent dies.
Sure.
There's a member of our community, Catherine Mason, who for many, many years, about 15 years, led a grief support group at the middle school at BAMS. And she wrote a very beautiful piece for one of our annual reports about bringing the kids here. And if it's okay, I'd like to read that. Yeah. Again, this is written by Catherine Mason. The garden has been a gift to so many young people in our community. Over a period of several weeks, the teens find their special rock. They share stories about the loved ones who are gone. They paint, decorate, write, shed tears together. And then we all go to the garden, light a candle, and each find a place for their memory stone amidst the many others. I can't tell you how much it means to them and to me that the garden is there. Its vitality is so present and affirming for these kids. They feel so not alone having the garden, a garden they believe is as much theirs as the next person. They know they are connected to others in our town through love and loss. On their own, they have brought their families to the garden and share it with them. There's quite a remarkable legacy among those stone walls.
15 short years.
Yeah. So we really appreciate the work that Catherine has done with kids in our community.
It's striking me as we hear the school buses going by. Here it is Tuesday afternoon in September, and people are leaving work and bicyclists are going by here on Guilford Street, that the nature of this garden is to be smack dab in the community. It's not someplace that could be really remote that we would associate with a tranquil place. It is that, but it's very much that, right at the edge of the busyness of life as people are living it, including going to the prom, which is the last thing I would think of. You don't think about a memorial service or death or dying when you're going to the prom. But it's living. It's definitely living.
It's a stage and you're living, yes.
It is a stage. And we've talked a little bit about how the grieving process, when we're working together with it, takes us from a sense of isolation about our individual loss back into relationships, or creating new relationships with people, and how it's sort of, we find our way back into the community. There's something else that of course is sort of obvious on the face of it, that plants that bloom, living things, are something that's part of a grieving process. Recognizing the cycles of the season, is this really what's happening for us? What do you think, Lynn?
Well, I think it's not only the cycles of the season, it's the cycles of our lives that are illustrated through a garden. I mean, it's a perfect metaphor for things that are young and vulnerable and planted, and then they grow, and then they flourish, and then they die, which is what happens in our own life. And also, one of the things that happens at hospice actually is a lot of times they use writing and art as a way of processing grief also, and a lot of times the garden is like in this piece at the heart of it. And I myself, as a poet, use that cycle, because I'm also cycling from dawn to evening, and so I relate very strongly to this garden and what gardens represent, and particularly the living part of it. And that things go on. They don't end. They come up. Something else comes up next year.
And the perennials and the trees drop their leaves, but then they come back again in the spring.
But primarily, I think people come here to grieve and to reach out to each other and know that their grieving does not go. This is a grieving that goes on in this garden every year, next year also. And that's important.
So is it also important to locate ourselves in a changing, something that changes, so that we understand that this is part of the change, but also that hopefully changes for us.
Well, grief changes your life, and so it sure relate to the change in seasons. Which season? Well, it's another great metaphor people will use to tell you where they are in your life. Sometimes one saying, I have one woman who was a part of the group I was doing who gardening has saved her. She's a huge garden, and her child died near that garden. But for her to go back and to regrow everything every year is such an affirming thing for her, and a connection to this child. So yeah, gardens are good.
As Susan mentioned earlier, it might be possible to overwhelm this site with a large gathering. It is a fairly small space, but there's so much growing here, and there's so much changing here, with the light, with the seasons, the stone, the plants, the trees, the things that are built, the things that occur naturally. It really is a wonderful addition to what hospice can offer the community. And the tie-in with Living Memorial Park is also just a wonderful example of how Brattleboro Area Hospice is enmeshed in the Brattleboro and the Windham County area. It's just a real reaffirmation of community, the importance of nature, and regeneration.
You get that also, I think, from the slates, because I walk around, and I didn't put Marty Jeezer there, but there's Marty Jeezer, who's part of my community and who I knew very well, and whom I really miss. And then I walk here, and there's Irene, Irene Alexi. So it's not just my own personal family, it's community family.
So true.
Connie and Lynn, thanks for joining me here today.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure.
And if you would like to learn more about this, you could call Brattleboro Area Hospice at 802-257-0775 or go to brattleborohospice.org. My name is Richard Ewald. I'm a hospice volunteer. Thank you for joining us here today at the Memorial Garden.